I got the recording going. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the Title IX McKinney-Vento Subgrant competition webinar for the FY26, 27, and 28 school years. I appreciate you taking the time to join this morning. We will be talking about how to apply for the application. Let me go ahead and, so let me go ahead and talk about the disclaimer here at the state. We do not currently permit the use of AI-generated tools such as Otter. If you do start an AI tool, you will be removed from the meeting. So we do appreciate that you respect that. We are recording today's webinar and it will be posted as always in ePlan, TDO resources. So you'll have those options and those tools once they are posted. For the webinar, we provide a quick overview of McKinney-Vento rights and the definition under the Act. We will also cover the subgrant purpose and the funding, monitoring, and reporting requirements. We will look at the application component and strategies for submitting a robust application. And lastly, we will wrap up with questions, resources, and if we have time, we'll look at the actual application in ePlan. So really, there's not any major changes to the application this year. There's a few things that have been tweaked, but overall, it is pretty much the same as it has been in the past. So let's look at the history. The Homeless Persons Survival Act was introduced in both House of Congress in 1986. The act contained emergency relief measures, preventative measures, and long-term solutions for homeless. Only small pieces of the proposal, however, were enacted into law. The Homeless Eligibility Clarification Act of 1986 removed permanent address requirements and other barriers to existing programs such as supplement Social Security income, aid to families with dependent children, veterans benefits, food stamps, and Medicaid. Also in 1986, the Homeless Housing Act was adopted. This legislation created the Emergency Shelter Grant Program and Transitional Housing Demonstration Program. Both programs were administered by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which we know as HUD. The first federal law to directly impact the education of students experiencing homelessness was enacted in 1987 as part of the Stuart v. McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. The McKinney-Vento Act was most recently reauthorized by Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015, which is the ESSA. These are your two namesakes. There is Stuart B. McKinney there on the left and Bruce Vento on the right. Bruce was from Minnesota, as you can see, and Stuart McKinney was from Connecticut. They're the ones who brought this this bill into play for us to be able to have McKinney-Vento. All right, so just to recap, under the federal law, the definition of homeless under the McKinney-Vento Act is children or youth who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, including children and youth who are sharing the housing of other persons due to loss of housing, economic hardship, or similar reason, living in hotels, motels, trailer parks, campgrounds due to lack of alternate adequate accommodations, living in emergency or transitional shelters, or abandoned in hospitals, living in a public or private place not designed for or ordinarily used as a regular sleeping accommodation, living in cars, parks, public spaces, abandoned buildings, substandard housing, bus or train station, or similar settings, and who are migratory living in the above circumstances. All right, so let's go ahead and get into our purpose of being here today is the McKinney-Vento Subgrant Overview. So the McKinney-Vento Subgrant cycle is for, like I mentioned, FY26, 27, and 28. LEAs will complete an application that contains a plan for all 3 years. Each year of the grant cycle, the LEA will be awarded funding and will complete a budget on the approved FY26 grant application. The app opens today, actually is already open, and must be an LEA authorized representative form no later than May 21st at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern. If you don't have it in that time frame, ePlan will not allow you to submit and you will not be eligible to apply for the subgrant. Again, if you do receive this funding, it's 3 years. You're guaranteed money for 3 years. You just have to apply one time. All Tennessee LEAs are eligible to apply for the subgrant, regardless of the number of homeless students they serve. Um, These funds will be in addition to additional funding to be used to support your homeless programmings. All applications must contain a plan again for all 3 academic years. We're not just looking at what you're going to do in FY26, but all 3 years for this application. The formula is based on a per pupil amount and shall not exceed more than 20% of the state's award amount. So even if you're a larger LEA, you still will not receive more than 20% of the state's award. If you're a smaller LEA, it will, of course, base it off of your per pupil amount. Based on a guidance from the Department of Education, SEAs are required to ensure that grant applications are high quality, and each LEA must score a minimum of 70 points based on the rubric developed by the Federal Programs and Oversight Team in order to be eligible to receive funding. So again, anything below a 70 would automatically not be eligible for grant funds. You can also look at the rubric to base when you're writing your application. I highly recommend that you look at the rubric when you're applying or when you're writing it. And then also you can look at the business rules. It explains the scores and percentages for additional funding if there is any available. But yes, I highly recommend that you take the time to look at that rubric that the grant reviewers will be using to score your applications. Just a quick timeline for you guys to have. Of course, that, like I said, the application opens today. It is due on Wednesday, May 21st at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern. Again, ePlan will not let you submit if it is in after that time. You will get an error and will not be able to submit. The state will review starting on May 30th. I will have the grant reviewer webinar to explain to them how to use the rubric and grade the applications. And I will also, once all applications are in, I will go into all applications. I will be checking for allowability only. So I'm not looking at your grants for quality or anything like that. It'll be solely to see if everything that you've put in the application is allowable under federal law for McKinney-Vento, but anything else will be scored by and looked at by the grant reviewers. June 2nd through the 24th is when your grant reviewers will begin looking at the applications and scoring those. We have 5 teams of 2. At this point, if we need more reviewers, we will get more reviewers. All reviewers for Tennessee are state with the Department of Education. So I know that if you have any friends outside of other states, they pay grant reviewers to come in and review grants, but we do use internal members of the team to review your applications. And then on July 3rd, looks like having issues. I don't know. Are you guys, can everyone still hear me okay? Thumbs up. Okay. Well, okay. Thumbs up. Okay. So on or before Thursday, July 3rd, all applicants will be notified of their final application status. And then on July 7th, all funds, if you are awarded the application, will be loaded into the grant and you can begin budgeting the funding at that time. Again, you'll get an official letter from the department if you are a winner. If you are not, you'll also get an official letter saying that you are not eligible for the grant this year. So just a reminder, the purpose of the McKinney-Vento Education for Homeless Children and Youth, EHY program, is to ensure that each homeless child or youth has equal access to the same free public education, including a public preschool education as provided to other children and youth. So while the application can identify more than one goal for each focus, at minimum, applicants must identify at least one goal and one activity in each of the following three focus areas. So you must have a goal around regular school attendance by students in transition or students experiencing homelessness. You must have a goal around identification of homeless children and youth. And you also must have a goal around reducing academic achievement gaps. Now, you can add more if you would like, but these are at least at minimum the three that you have to have to be eligible to apply. And then, of course, I will go into this a little bit more detail in just a minute. But remember, these are the main three things that you have to have in order to be eligible. All right, so looking at fiscal considerations, likely like any other federal grant, McKinney-Vento subgrant funds should add to, not or supplement, and not replace or supplant other funds. So that includes your state or local funds. It also includes other federal funding, such as your Title I Part A homeless set aside, your Perkins, your IDEA, any other funding that's federally awarded. It is important to note that McKinney-Vento subgrants does allow for braiding of funds. So that is something that is an option for you if you want to braid your funds. I did have an LEA who braided their funds with their ARP homeless because their McKinney-Vento was not enough to purchase a vehicle, but they used a little bit of their ARP and a little bit of their McKinney-Vento. So those funds can be braided. When planning the subgrant, consider how funds can work together and coordinate with other funding streams, again, such as your Title I Part A homeless set aside. So let's talk about allowable use of funds with subgrant funds. These funds can be used for tutoring, supplemental instruction, enriched educational services. You've got to make sure that you're linking those to the achievement of their academics, right? So it can't just be just tutoring overall because we need to tutor. It needs to be showing that it is for a purpose and it is going to be helping with your academic standards, with your academic standards. Note that if an LEA has a tutoring program supported through other funding sources and it's being provided to all students in the LEA, then McKinney-Vento subgrant cannot be used. So if it's just a tutoring program for your McKinney-Vento students, you can use it. But if there's something your district already pays for everyone, then you cannot use your McKinney-Vento funding for it. If the LEA does not have a tutoring program in place, then and it's an additional service above and beyond what's being offered to everyone else, then you can use those funds. And that's the rule for everything. If it's above and beyond what everyone else is provided, then you can use McKinney-Vento subgrant funds for this. McKinney-Vento funds can and should be used for professional development of your school staff. So again, you got to make sure your staff understand about McKinney-Vento, making sure they're aware of like supports, resources, anything like that. You need to make sure that you're heightening the protocols for identifying and serving homeless students through that PD. We're not just coming together to have a PD about your typical McKinney-Vento. They need to know how to identify and how to report if they suspect that someone may be experiencing homelessness. McKinney-Vento funds can be used for referral services. So while you cannot use McKinney-Vento funds directly for medical treatments or dental work, it can be used for referral services to get these students seen by a doctor to be able to figure out what they may need for treatment. And then, of course, you would have to use your community-based organizations or other supports to pay for any actual treatments. McKinney-Vento does not pay for medicines or anything in that way as well. It's solely for the referral of services. Let's see, it does not pay for co-pays, medical bills, any kind of medication. I just said that. So those services, again, will all have, if you need funding for that, will have to go through a different source. Also, you can pay for the excess cost of transportation. We all know that is one of the biggest pieces of homeless programming is transportation. It is federally mandated that you provide transportation so that if you have excess cost, you can use McKinney-Vento to pay that. So what I mean by that is if you have a student who may be on a bus, but the bus needs to go a little extra outside of the traditional route because that student is a little bit out of the route and it's costing a little additional money, then you can pay that additional cost for that student. Or if it's anything related to the transportation, you can pay that cost as well. So funds can be used for developmentally appropriate early childhood education programs, not otherwise provided by federal, state, or local funding. So for preschool aged homeless children, your Head Start programs are federally funded. So you wouldn't really necessarily be able to pay for a Head Start, but this is where you'd work with a Head Start program to get the child into that program. But you can use McKinney-Vento funds for that. McKinney-Vento funds can be used to develop communication tools, resources, MOUs, policies and procedures, making sure that you can use that funding for your best practices. Again, with your local Head Start programs, collaborate with your pre-K programs or other early childhood programs. Again, Ed has really started to focus in the past couple of years on early learning and Head Start. So really making an effort to maybe use funding to support these early learners. McKinney-Vento funds can be used for provision of homeless children and youth before and after school care, possibly mentoring or summer programs. You can also hire a teacher or a qualified individual to run these positions or these programs. Maybe it's homework assistance, supervision of educational activities, anything like that is related directly to their education. McKinney-Vento funds can be used for. McKinney-Vento funds can be used to provide mentors for McKinney-Vento students to help with post-secondary applications, course selections, anything that that student may need to move on to higher education. That person can help with that. Other examples would be increased work time of support staff to assist with evaluations, identification, setting up transportation, providing supplies to students. This person can have that role, and it is allowable under McKinney-Vento. Also, making sure if you hire that person that they are connecting with families to make sure they're getting all the needed services. McKinney-Vento funds can be used to pay for CTE courses and other needed supplies, such as calculators and other supplies, dual enrollment for college classes, credit recovery, all of those things. Necessary payments and fees associated with tracking, obtaining, and transferring records to make sure that you're enrolling your homeless students in time. And I say that because if maybe, the student has a fee and the records need to be transferred out, you can use your McKinney-Vento fee. If your LEA is not willing to waive that fee, you can use your McKinney-Vento to pay that fee to get those records out the door. If necessary, the payment of fees, I'm sorry, I already said that. You can also use the fees for immunizations, other required health records if you need to pay for that as well. McKinney-Vento funds can only be used for the student. It is not meant to support the whole family. McKinney-Vento is for the student experiencing homeless only. The family only benefits incidentally. So if you are buying food for the student, you are, maybe it's a loaf of bread, the family's incidentally going to be getting some of that bread or milk, whatever it may be, but it is only for the homeless student. So that also would say, like, if you're paying for a driver's license fee or maybe a work background fee, that can only be for your student and not for a parent. McKinney-Vento can be used to support the students. Remembering that McKinney-Vento can only be used to support the success of students academically and educationally. So years back when I first started, I was like, prom tickets are allowable under McKinney-Vento. Unfortunately, they are not. prom is not considered academic or educationally related. That cost would come from a community-based organization. Something that could be academic or educational would be a field trip, a course, maybe an extracurricular activity, and they need a uniform for that particular extracurricular activity. But again, it has to be academically and educationally related in order to be eligible for or allowable under McKinney-Vento. Uh, McKinney-Vento funds can be used to provide training to your community partners, which are community-based organizations, because you want to make sure they understand McKinney-Vento. You want to understand how they can help you identify students and provide services to them. You also want to make sure that you can use your funding for your MOUs. You want to make sure you have an MOU in place so that you understand and they understand what their roles are when helping you with identification and supporting your families. Funds can be used to identify professional development activities that can support community partnerships and increase identification. To provide training to parents or guardians. Again, it has to be McKinney-Vento related, right? It can't just be a training that you want to have to bring the parents in. It has to be related somehow to students experiencing homelessness and their educational academic needs. And then also any other activities designated to increase meaningful involvement for those parents. So as long as it's meaningful involvement, it should be allowable under McKinney-Vento, or it could be, I should say, could be allowable under McKinney-Vento. The provision of specialized instruction support services, including violence prevention counseling or referrals for such services. And then activities to address particular needs of homeless children and youth that may arise from domestic violence or parental mental health or substance abuse problems. So again, you're looking at that whole child, your wraparound supports for anything that may have come from the parents, again, domestic violence or whatever that may look like. McKinney-Vento funds can be used to maybe adapt a room or a space in maybe a shelter or a facility. For example, we've had lots of LEAs who have put little work areas in a shelter that has things like a printer and a computer that homeless families have access to. I say that homeless families would have students that are in a public school. Those families are eligible for these options in the shelters. A lot of times, homeless liaisons have someone that goes out to the shelter and that center, and that's when that center is open for the families to be able to come use that and work with getting applications filled out and things like that. Again, if you're doing anything outside of your typical school and you're doing it out in a facility, the key to remember is that any supplies or spaces used for McKinney-Vento students, the LEA will need to show how these supplies like technology, computers, printers are going to be tracked and used for McKinney-Vento students and their families only. Funds can be used for any expenses necessary to facilitate identification, enrollment, retention, and of course, the educational success of homeless children and youth. And remember, I keep talking about identification. That's one of your goals, but also it is the part of your programming that really needs to be, if you're not identifying, if you're under identifying, this is a good way to get those numbers up and make sure you're getting those services to those students. Identification can be the heightened awareness in the community of what services are available to homeless children. Again, remember, McKinney-Vento is not only for low-income families. McKinney-Vento is for any family that loses housing, that have children in the public school system, whether it be through a natural disaster, a fire, anything like that. McKinney-Vento is eligible for those students. Again, not just low income. For some reason, my camera is having issues today, so I'm just going to keep it off. Let's see, anything else. While food is allowable, you're required to exhaust all of your community organizations, your community-based organizations, your churches, your food banks before you purchase food. So again, it is allowable, but you have to make sure everything has been exhausted before that. We really want funds to be used more for other pieces of it for maybe your tutoring or other activities. But again, it is allowed. Again, food is meant to be supplied for the McKinney-Vento student and not the entire family. And then, of course, there's the last one is other extraordinary emergency assistance needed to enable homeless children and youth to attend school. So all the things I've said, there's that little caveats, case by case. And while you may apply for it today, and I say yes, approved for one student, it may, same situation, but a little bit different, may not be allowable for the other student slash family. So again, it's just emergency assistance and those and extraordinary. Those are things that you reach out to the department for, and we go through that together and talk through the situation and see if it will be allowable. So remember that when you're looking at your applications, when you're filling out that your request. Any questions at this point? All of those that I just went through are posted in ePlan under TDO resources. They have the exhausted list over there. And then also in the National Center for Homeless Education, they also have the allowable use of funds as well. All right, so let's look at funding. Funds for the subgrant are congruent upon the annual state allocation, which is sourced by the U.S. Department of Education through the McKinney-Vento Homeless Education Assistance Improvement Act of 2001. Allocation amounts are calculated on a per pupil basis based on the LEA's reported count of students experiencing homeless each fiscal year of the grant cycle. So again, maybe you had only 20 students in FY26, but for some reason something happened, and now you have 60 homeless students in FY27. Then your amount of funding will either go up or down based on the numbers that you have reported. Just a quick glance at what the funding amounts look like. Again, it's based on what the state receives and how we will be able to distribute that money. It also is based on the number of people that apply and win the subgrant. LEAs may request additional funds beyond their tier bracket. Additional funds will be awarded based on availability of funds, the quality of the LEA's submitted grant application and homeless program, and the rationale used to support the request for additional information. Applications must satisfy the following criteria to express a need for additional funding within the application. The Title I Part A homeless set-aside amount provided must equal at least 10% of the total subgrant allocation request. The LEA must provide a detailed process used to determine the amount of Title I Part A homeless set-aside. The LEA must provide a narrative expressing the need for additional funding and how the funds will benefit the LEA homeless education program. So if you aren't already friends with your Title I Part A homeless or your Title I Part A, if you're not friends with your Title I person, you need to get friends with them so they can help you with completing this if you're asking for additional funding. Even if not, you do need to know what's happening in your Title I Part A homeless set-aside funding and what the application is saying to support your programming. A lot of times, homeless liaisons are not even aware they have the homeless set-aside funding, so make sure that you are working with your team and everyone is aware of what's happening under your Title I Part A homeless set-aside. A reminder of general budget narrative requirements for all proposed expenditures. As with all federal education funds, McKinney-Vento all McKinney-Vento purchases must be reasonable in the proposed goods and services and are not excessive in cost and are based on prudent and sound purchasing practices. It must be necessary in that goods and services are essential for carrying out the grant program as indicated in the McKinney-Vento Subgrant Application. It must be allocable in the goods and services that are specific for the benefit of the grant and meet the program's intent and objectives. So let's look at the monitoring and reports. If you are awarded the funding application, these are the things that you'll be required to complete as a subgrant, as a subgrantee. The mid-year performance review. This is something that is required. It is an extension of the subgrant application. The review will allow LEAs to reflect on what has been working within the homeless program and the areas that might need refinement. Liaisons will be required to complete the document to utilizing goals and activities that were put in the FY26 subgrant application. So in 27 and 28, you're going to refer back to your FY26 subgrant application. This report is typically due annually in January and is completed and submitted in the data and information area of ePlan. Part of the mid-year performance review is subgrantees are required to hold a mid-year check-in with me to make sure that, if they have any questions, if there's anything we need to talk about. It'll just give us a chance to reflect on their data and to discuss any implementation of the subgrant to determine if there's any adjustments that need to be made. And then also just a chance to share your success stories that have happened to date, if you have any, and then talk about what you would like to see from the department to continue to support you as you're going through the school year. And then, of course, with that subgrant, you'll submit the application, and then I'll set up calls with everyone. Then you're also required to do the annual closeout report. This will help to provide information, data, and evidence of quality of program implementation, opportunities for program development, and the consideration of future funding. So this is where you're going to ask for your next year's funding amounts. So for FY, if you're at FY26 and we're closing out, you're going to be asking for your FY27 funds in your closeout report. So that is another reason why it is highly important that you take the time to complete this application. The annual reporting period is July 1 through June 1. So that's the numbers that you will be sharing in your closeout report. This report is typically due annually at the end of June and must be completed and submitted in the data and information section of ePlan. Again, this all sounds kind of daunting. It is not. They're pretty easy to complete. And if you have any questions while you're completing any of these documents, I'm always here to support. So don't let that deter you from applying. All right, so looking at application components and instructions. Anyone wishing to access the application in ePlan must have the correct ePlan user access role in order to be able to apply to have access to the grant. To review existing access, visit the ePlan.tn.gov, navigate to the address book and ePlan role contacts, and view who is listed within the LEA that has the Title IX McKinney-Vento Director role, and that person is the one who will be able to hit draft started and work in the application and then close out the application for submission. New ePlan users and existing ePlan users who need a new user access role must request the additional role using the form that is also it's on the slide, as well as on the ePlan homepage that I will give you how to fill it out and how to apply for that access. Anyone who is McKinney-Vento already homeless liaison has been grandfathered into that. So you should already have access to that. For some reason, if you don't, you'll need to apply for that. To access the McKinney-Vento Subgrant Application, you'll navigate to the Title IX McKinney-Vento application from the ePlan homepage by hovering your mouse over the Funding tab to the left menu and then selecting Funding Application. You'll select the fiscal year that you're desired, which will be 2026. And that will be in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. The funding applications are stored in ePlan according to state fiscal year. For example, 2026 indicates it's the 2025-26 school year. You'll click on the application name to open the application, then make sure that you hit draft started. Super important. If you do not hit draft started before you move to the next page, you will not be able to work anything on the application. It will be grayed out. So you'll have to complete draft started. It has got me several times that I did not hit draft started. So make sure that you do that before you're moving forward to the next page. There on the cover page, it's just your basic information that we're looking for. Make sure that everything on there is correct. If you do have someone that leaves a role or a new homeless liaison comes in, ensure that that information is updated in this application as well. We do use this cover page to make contacts when there's questions about your subgrant or things like that for your homeless programming, as well as the consolidated funding application. And that I will cover in our end of the year meeting. But if anything, ensure that it's on your cover page here. Your budget narrative should be detailed enough to show that the items and amounts budgeted are allowable, reasonable, and necessary for the implementation of grant activities. What activities are being implemented and what is being purchased. And the purchases and programs meet supplement and not supplant provisions. If positions are being funded, include your position titles and a full-time equivalent, your FTEs, in the narrative. Remember, your FTEs have to be a whole number. So if you're doing one FTE, it's one homeless liaison. If you're doing a tutorer, it's one FTE, and the amount they may work 0.25 hours, right? And so that is your FTEs always has to be a whole number. The E-Plan process for entering the Title IX McKinney-Vento Subgrant Application budget is consistent with all other grants and E-Plans. So if you do any other grants, it's the exact same thing here. Each LEA must have a department-approved budget and E-Plan before requesting reimbursement. So on the front end of things, there's no money loaded in, but once the money is loaded in, you will have to have a reimbursement request approved by the department. Important that the initial FY26 subgrant application, LEA should provide a budget for the total amount of funds being requested for FY26. So when you go in there in the application and you're going to be budgeting for your application, you've heard me say 3 years. For this particular piece in your budget, you're only going to put the budget for this upcoming fiscal year for FY26. Throughout the application, you're going to be building it for the whole 3 years, but for budget purposes, it's just your FY26. So if you're got $75,000 you're putting in for FY26, that's what you're going to budget and show what you're going to put in that budget and have those details in there. We talked about full-time equivalents for all staff paid with grant funds within the budget narrative to make sure that matches the FTEs within all areas of the grant application. Items and amounts budgeted must be reasonable and necessary. I can't say that enough. We have to make sure that it's aligning and it's necessary. Please refer to the McKinney-Vento Subgrant Tech Guide for the major function and object codes. That's where you can find all of those things that are needed for the budget. Would be in the McKinney-Vento Subgrant Tech Guide, which is already posted in E-Plan. All right, so let's talk about need and rationale. Do we have any questions? So for your need and rationale, this is the first part of the application. You're going to reflect on prioritized educational, social, emotional, and other mental health records for homeless children and youth served by the LEA. For the response, you want to consider challenges and needs around identification, transportation, housing, delivery of services and resources, school, extracurricular activities, attendance. And then second is how are these needs determined? Third is what data was used with and what stakeholders were involved. So again, we're not looking at we're not looking at the quantity of information, we're looking at the quality of information when you're answering these narratives. Current subgrantees will complete a question, describe how the subgrant supported the needs of children and youth experiencing homelessness during the most recent grant cycle. That was FY20 through FY22. I'm sorry, that is the current grant cycle will be FY24 through FY25. My apologies. Please provide data and trends to support your claim. Question in the chat box, the slide deck and TDA resources shows different slides for part one. Yes, that was an oversight. Wendy posted these slides about 2 weeks ago, and I did a quick adjustment this morning, and I will explain that in just a minute, and then I will get the right slide deck and e-plan after today's call. So my apologies. So what she's talking about here is the need and rationale part of it. Last year, there was a big chart that we had where we loaded information in with your numbers by grade level. This year, we are asking that you only submit your head count of the students that you had for 24-25 school year. And then the number that has been loaded in it was from the February 2025 CFA number that was bulk loaded in to that chart. And then also you will enter the number of students that are in their living population, whether it be hotel, motel. Typically we preload that in and then you put your numbers in underneath that. However, that is what has changed. Let me go ahead and show you. So this is what's different. Now it's just, you're just going to give us your total count of students for 24-25. And then again, like I said, the number that the state has bulk loaded in is your CFA count from February of 2025. And then below, these are the numbers you put in for your shelter, your doubled up, unsheltered, and hotels. There's still the question at the bottom that shows that ask if there's any discrepancies and to explain those discrepancies. So if your numbers are a big, like we say you have 23 students reported in your EIS, but you'd have 60, we want to know the discrepancy between those numbers. It could simply be that when we pulled it in February, there was a natural disaster that came in after February and those numbers went up. And if that's the case, just simply write, we experienced a natural disaster. And so this is why our numbers aren't aligning with the February count that is posted. I have a question for the head count. Do we include those that moved away during the year? Yes, if you serve them this year, they would be in your homeless count. Okay, so part two. Describe how, the first question you have is describe how the educational program and services provided by the grant will meet the identification needs of the LEA's homeless children and youth. And then the second one is describe the strategy to promote the participation of students in transition to non-academic programs. Describe how the LEA will promote meaningful engagement of parents, families, guardians, and the education of homeless children and youth. And explain the LEA's policies and procedures in place to ensure students experiencing homelessness are not isolated or stigmatized. And in the related documents section, you will have to upload these policies. There are 3 required policies. They are the McKinney-Vento dispute resolution process. They are the homeless policy and procedure that you use. And lastly, it's the transportation policy and procedure that you have. And then optional, you have that you can add any other program documents that you have to support your homeless programming. It could be something that you give to families just as a welcome. This is what we do here. These are all the people that you contact. Anything that you want to show to your grant reviewers, what you're doing in your homeless programming, that would be that you can upload in the related documents section. Again, I can't say it enough. We're not looking at quantity of your application. If you've got a really great narrative that's like 3 paragraphs long, if it doesn't really answer the question, then it's not going to be a quality. And so we really are looking at the quality of your application. So looking at part 3 of the application, like I mentioned earlier, applicants can identify more than one goal from each focus area. At minimum, applicants must identify at least one goal and activity in each of the 3 focus areas: regular school attendance by students experiencing homelessness, identification of students experiencing homelessness, and reducing academic achievement gaps. And in a separate chart, and provide detailed description of your planned activities, including in your response at least one program goal linked to the focus area, the agency responsible if it's not the LEA, a description of at least one activity that will be implemented to meet the program goal, a justification of the need of the activity, the data source or sources utilized to measure the effectiveness of the activity, and a general time frame of the activity, expected measurable outcomes of the activity, and rows as needed. So there's the rows below that if you need to add more information to your goals, activities, and outcomes. And then this is what it would look like. Again, you put in your program goal, making sure you put those details in and answering that question. Your narrative should be detailed enough that your reviewers can gain a complete understanding of all the activity components, including specific details of what is being purchased and implemented. So for positions that are being funded, include positions, titles, full FTEs in the description, and the best to provide as much detail as possible. Again, once the grant reviewers have had their webinar with me, they will then go read the applications. And so if they can't clearly understand what you're doing with your program, the less points it will probably score your application. So make sure that you put that enough detail that they can clearly understand what's happening. It's important to remember when you're completing this portion of the application, which is part 4, is your coordination and collaboration, that you remember that McKinney-Vento does require under federal law that you work with your community-based organization, because homelessness is your program cannot be just you. You have to be able to have those supports and resources throughout your community, including churches and other organizations to help with your homeless programming. You cannot meet the needs alone to be able to really successfully provide services and supports to these children and families. Homelessness is a community-wide problem, so requiring a community-wide response that includes measures to address housing, healthcare, employment, and school attendance and success. Without the support of your local agencies, again, you really won't be able to fully support these students experiencing homelessness. You want to provide, again, as much detail in the narrative charts to be able to describe how the program is going to supplement the program and the services that were provided through your federal, state, and local programs. So just clearing it all up so everybody understands. Also, you want to complete the 2 tables focused on collaboration, collaboration within the LEA, and then collaboration outside of the LEA, collaboration with your Title I homeless set aside and other programs as needed. Okay, so looking at your head counts and FTEs. Again, all staff funded through the grant of the application page must have head counts. It must always be a whole number. And then you round your FTEs to the nearest 100th as necessary. Part 5 of the application is your personnel. So if you have a state system-wide, someone who is going to all the schools in the district, that would be where you put that information, your FTEs and your head counts, and then then you have your school personnel. So if you have someone at the school level that only works for that school, that is where you put that information and those FTEs and head counts as well. Training and awareness under McKinney-Vento Assistance Act, that you're required as a homeless liaison to ensure that your school personnel are being provided training and that they are aware of McKinney-Vento services, supports, and identification. Again, is a federal requirement that you are training your personnel, at minimum your enrollment staff, but your teachers as well, and anyone that is in the school that will be working with students. You're going to complete the chart to explain how your professional development opportunities will be demonstrated to the district staff or community partners. I don't think I have a screenshot of that, but it's pretty basic. You're just going to go in there, put what the training is, the purpose of it, and the date that you plan to hold that training. And then describe how LEA will ensure that homeless liaisons or the designated or designees will attend the in-person or virtual National Association of the Education of Homeless Children and Youth NACE annual conference. So that is a requirement under McKinney-Vento. If you do win the subgrant, you are required to attend the NACE conference, whether it be in person or virtually, but it is part of your requirement for getting the subgrant. And then you also can bring some of your homeless program team, but at minimum, it must be one person from the program team that does attend that conference. So last, we're looking at funding and set aside. So Title I homeless set aside, we're going to ask you to put that amount, whatever you have designated for the 24-25 school year. We'll auto-populate into that, and then you're going to put what activities and stuff you have planned. So you will provide the amount for 25, 26, 26, 27, and 27, 28 for your Title I Part A homeless set aside. So remember, you have to work with that homeless or with your Title I person to make sure that you have the right funding amounts and you're able to answer these questions. You will need to identify the percentage of the 24-25 Title I homeless set aside funds that were spent on activities for homeless children and youth. If it's less than 100%, you'll need to explain why. And then, of course, you'll need what is the process used to determine your Title I Part A homeless set aside. Like, what did you do? Did you look at your needs assessment, or did you look at your data? And did you look at all of it? Like, explain to us or to the grant reviewers what you did to determine the amount that you were going to use for your homeless set aside. And then you're going to, this is another very important part, you're going to complete the request of funds table. So there is, on the next slide, I have a screenshot, but you will complete the request of funds that you're looking for the FY26 funding. And then you will also, let's just go ahead and go over to this so you can see what I'm talking about. So you're going to, FY26 amount that you're requesting is going to go right in here. So this is where you're going to put FY26 and then your need and rationale behind your funding for FY26. Again, you're not putting all 3 years in there. We're just looking at the funding that you want for FY26. All right, so assurances, you want to make sure that you're reading those carefully to you read all the assurances and check the box that you hereby assure that the SEA and that the LEA meet each of the following conditions. Once the assurances have been reviewed, you will check the acknowledgement box at the top corner of the assurances page. In order to submit the application, you must click that button or you will not be able to submit. You'll get an error. Related documents, we're running out of time, so make sure we cover those. Again, there are 3 required documents: the dispute resolution, homeless policy and procedure, and transportation. Any other optional documents: nighttime residency, best interest, any printed information that you give to families, anything that supports your homeless programming. Your McKinney-Vento Subgrant checklist. So after the submission, if there are after I review it for allowability, if there is anything in there that's not allowable, I will go into the checklist and I will put attention needed, and you will have to go in and make the revisions needed based on the comments and on the subgrant checklist, and then have that resubmitted no later than May 30th. Again, if it's not back into LEA authorized form by May 30th, there could be a potential that it doesn't make it over to the grant reviewers. So it is very important that you do make those revisions quickly and get that application back in so that grant reviewers can begin reviewing it. Again, application submission, you're going to click draft start, let me slow down, draft completed. And then your LA authorized fiscal representative will have to also look at it and approve it. And then lastly, in order for it to be submitted, your director of schools or your LA authorized representative will also have to approve the application to be submitted. After all the LEA approvals, the application will be reviewed again by the grant reviewers who are department personnel. When you submit your application, you'll get a warning if there's any validations that need to be corrected. There might be an error, and if you click on that error, it'll take you back to the pages that you'll need to make adjustments on. Okay, and then again, like I said, once errors have been removed, you'll be able to submit your application to the department. So just remember, I've talked about it this whole time. Remember, and when you're writing your application, read the question, answer the question, answer all parts of the question. If it's multiple questions within that particular question, make sure that you're looking at all of the question, making sure that you're looking at your data, making sure that you're looking back at your needs assessment, making sure that you are covering all the highlights of your homeless programming. I can't recommend it. Look at that rubric. Make sure that what you're answering is aligning with the rubric. Make sure that you are looking at the tech guide if you have any questions. Make sure that you involve your team, your homeless program team, and your partners in your planning process for this application. And you want to make sure that you have clear alignment between the program needs and your rationale, the goals, activities, and outcomes outlined in the application. I have a question. Due to the allowability of extended carryover for this year, can we ask for less this year and then more the next 2 years? Yes. So with the subgrant, that is, if you need less funding for FY26, you definitely can ask for less funding. And each year, if you find that you need more money in FY26 or FY27, you can ask for additional funding. Now, there's no guarantee. Let's say you ask for $20,000 this year, and then in FY27 you need to be back at your regular funding amount that you're requesting, and you go back from like 20 to like 60,000. That's probably going to be too big of a jump, and so we probably won't be able to fund you back at the full 60,000. But if you can always ask for a decrease or an increase any year of the grant. The answer to Amanda's question was for headcount. Do we include those who moved away? Yes. For your student numbers, if you serve the student this year, your 24-25 school year, that's still going to be included in your number because that is a student that you served at some point in your homeless programming for this school year. Okay, to help support you in your application, I will host office hours. There is the office hours schedule. I believe it's twice a week or once a week. I can't remember exactly what I put up there, but it is starting in May, or the end of April and May. I will be hosting office hours, an hour where you can join and we'll talk about application to help support you in writing that. So if you have any questions at the time, please join the office hours. Here's the schedule right here, the 22nd, the 6th, 8th, and 14th. I believe the 22nd I've taken off, so you look at the schedule link. I might have to make an adjustment to this slide as well. But these are the dates that I'll be available on the last day of the 21st. That's an afternoon session, so right before you have to submit your application. Please, again, join these meetings. These office hours are there to support you, hear what the people are asking, and help build out a strong application. All the resources that you need are here. Again, that's going to be on the slide deck for you. Continued resources needs assessment. Any questions? I know we are out of time, but do you have questions? Let's see, we do have a few questions. Will be able to use McKinney-Vento funds to pay for a systems navigator if that person also helps with attendance? Michelle, yes, as long as that person, you can show, like if they're working, um, maybe it's a part-time and they work 3 days a week, just put all that into that. Say we have a systems navigator who also does attendance, but show the reasoning behind having your systems navigator, what hours, like if they are going to be like 0.5 over their head count, and what they'll be working in, that kind of thing. Yes, Alan, sorry, I did cover a lot and I did it really quickly. So I know, if you guys have any questions after this, as you all know, don't hesitate, shoot me an email, call me during office hours, regular office hours, subgrant office hours, but don't hesitate to reach out. And then, of course, please give me your feedback on this slide today. Let me know what adjustments need to be made for FY28 subgrant when we start this competition again. But again, thank you for joining us today. I know towards the end we got rushed, but please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. I look forward to this new subgrant competition and serving you guys in the next 3 years with McKinney-Vento Subgrant. So again, thanks for joining. I look forward to working with all of you.